Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. You're welcome to Iron Radio again. This is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach, powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and trains boxing and things like that.
Hey, this is Dr. Mike Nelson, Associate Professor at the Kerrigan Institute and creator of the Flex Diet Cert and the Phys Flex Cert, and getting close to sending in a rough version of the Triphasic 2 book with Coach Cal Dietz, which is all new stuff. So hopefully it'll be out this year if everything goes well.
Sweet.
Yeah.
This is Coach Durrell with Strength Guild in Kansas City. I am technically an international weightlifting coach, a strength, power, and performance coach, and I also now work with quite a few younglings, little kids.
And I am Lonnie Lowry. I'm a food industry consultant, exercise physiologist, former competitive bodybuilder. In the first piece, everybody, today, we're going to talk about science. And this stems from a coffee article, actually, that just came out in a publication called The Babylon Bee. The title is, again, this whole thing is sort of hyperbolic, and it's meant to be tongue-in-cheek. But I see where they're coming from, but it also makes me sad, I guess. So, man checks news each morning to see whether coffee is going to give him cancer or grant him immortality. In Buffalo, New York. Yeah. It says, local man Andre Rodriguez checks today's news to see if his morning cup of coffee would be causing imminent death or granting him immortality. At publishing time, Mr. Rodriguez learned that his French press coffee, in fact, was 5,000 times deadlier than his regular drip coffee, but would also give him X-ray vision. So I get what they're saying here. Like, you have heard that drip coffee, because of the paper filter, might filter out some of the diterpenes and some of the stuff that might cause your blood lipids to go a whack. It says, and this is sort of what makes me a little sad, because it's kind of science bashing, even though it's funny. Over the past decade, experts have determined that coffee absolutely causes and undoubtedly cures every single cancer in existence. And it goes on, and they actually get quotes from different researchers in here about, those beans are magic versus, deadly. This has come up in the past. There was that Proposition 65 in California. You've got to put a cancer label on your coffee or warning. In my opinion, that is absurd, because you're taking a single compound like acrylamide. You're taking something out of a food matrix. You're concentrating it and saying, oh, look, because the studies I've read are that, if anything, coffee is anti-carcinogenic, and I've read a lot of these papers for oral cancer, sometimes even among smokers, which is sort of remarkable. So when you see something like that, you're like, are we being hypersensitive here? Kind of thing. But anyway, it's a funny piece. I appreciate the journalism part of this, but also, again, it makes me kind of sad, because we were talking before we hit the record button just about how science is reductionist. A hypothesis is very narrow. They set up the methods in a study and they answer a very narrow thing. I'm not saying there aren't some papers out there that maybe there is a particular compound in coffee or other foods that might be carcinogenic when you're, again, in my opinion, taking it out of context. But in their study, they answered that narrow question. The problem is when we overgeneralize, we overconclude. It's like a hallmark, red flag or a mistake in science is we overconclude. Well, if it's true in this population, it must be true in others. If it's true at this dose, it's true in general practice. So my question, and Mike, I know we've talked about this before, as far as the reductionist nature. There's pros and cons here, right? But science answers these little tiny inchwise, inching forward kinds of answers and questions. What's your standard of practice? Like, when do you ignore breaking science in the news versus apply it to yourself or your clients?
Yeah, the first filter I kind of run it through is it solving a current problem or issue that I have or that my clients have? And I found that was the easiest thing, because that gets rid of a lot of things, and you can kind of become more selectively ignorant about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then if it is something that's just not in my wheelhouse at all, and I know that I don't know and probably won't figure it out. Like, for example, cardiovascular risk with, lipid profiles and blood work. I know some of the basic stuff, but if they start diving down a little bit deeper, I have a MD, PhD guy literally keep on retainer to be like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, for more in-depth stuff. So that's easier, so I can still get an answer to people, but I don't have to be up to date on everything. If it is something that is in my wheelhouse or things that I'm interested in, I always try to pull the full study to see what's going on, or at least read the abstract to start to see if I want to read the full study. Because was it a cell, petri dish study? Was it done in, fuzzy one-eyed, gray rodents? Was it a cell line study? Was it a human study? And usually if it's like really crazy results, but it's like a cell line study, it's like, if it's a rat study, maybe a little more interesting. Like you've shown with a lot of the research on CLA, doesn't necessarily transfer to humans either. And the last part then is if it looks like there's some interesting things and there's some human data, I always try to figure out what is the downside first. So if we do this thing, what do we understand, like what the negative effects could happen? I'm much more interested in that to see if it's safe than actually efficacious. Because if there isn't much of a downside, say like if you're looking at ketone esters, like most of them have been established as pretty safe. Like we've got some pretty good data on that. Do we know all of the exact effects that they're going to have? Not really, but most of them I feel pretty confident testing out because I don't think there's much of a downside in terms of safety, although we don't know what the upside is. So that's kind of how I look at it. And then, ideally we'd want, studies in athletes and, randomized, controlled and multiple and, done by different labs. But we also live in the real world where that's just probably not going to happen for most things for years to decades to longer than decades.
Yeah. I mean, I guess at least now we have these meta-analyses and umbrella reviews. I mean, if I'm going to apply something to practice, I'd like to look at something like that where they try to include, but even then, the inclusion and exclusion criteria that they employ makes me raise an eyebrow sometimes. Like, why do you kick out these studies? Are you trying to reverse engineer a conclusion here? But the fact that we have studies of other studies now, it does help in that regard. God, I totally empathize with your point about we can't be specialists in frickin' everything. Everything is so specialized now. You got to go to the people that is their wheelhouse. Like I see this stuff about coffee, and Mike, I'm pretty well read on that topipic right now. And it's
I just published a paper on it.
I'm just rolling my eyes at some of this stuff. Like, you take the bit of news. One of the things I do is I see where does this fit in what I do understand about the topic, right? After 3 decades of reading stuff, valid scientific literature, right? But also practical application. What do I know to be true or likely to be true? Does this fit or does it refute some of that stuff? Yeah, and the way the news works is the news cycle is so brief. And, the turnover is so quick. All they want is drama. Like, so it's an epidemiological paper, big population based, and not cause and effect. And they're like, oh, guess what? Blah, blah, blah. Now coffee causes, blah, or whatever. And the people who run out and try to apply that, honestly, I don't know how many people really do, but you have to have a certain amount of acumen or reading or experience to fit this puzzle piece in, right, with the bigger puzzle of science on a topic. And I think that's why I'm always on my curmudgeon soapbox about, get people to say, I'm not educated or experienced in any way. I just want to share my thoughts. Well, that's kind of dangerous. We used to call that ignorant. Now we call it influencer. So I used to say in class, you can't just show one new study, even if it's from Tufts or Harvard, and say, I'm going to change everything. This changes everything. These are the new rules. And I know there's a lot of books, even from people who are my friends that write stuff like that. But no, you're not going to rewrite the rules for something with one new study, no matter where it's from or how many subjects or how tightly controlled, randomized, placebo-controlled, all that. You're not going to rewrite everything in my mind. It would be a real noob, I think, that would start barking something to his or her clients based on one new study, even if it was interesting, you know.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a good point that if it's an area I am well read and up to date on the literature, that I'm actually trying to look for stuff to disprove my current hypothesis, right? Because if you come up with a solid study and it is legit, like you only need one data point to disprove your hypothesis, right? It's like students, I tell them, and I don't know who I stole this story from, is that if your hypothesis is that all swans are white, right? And so there's this theory about this guy who spends his whole life, looking at studying all these swans everywhere around the world and documenting, thousands of white swans. And then some guy from down south posts a picture of a black swan in his backyard in the swamp on the internet. And you're like, oh, he just invalidated my whole life's work with like one picture on the internet of a black swan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like he should have been looking for the black swans or the purple swans or whatever, the thing that's going to disprove his hypothesis, not necessarily spending all your time trying to gather more data to quote unquote prove your hypothesis.
Yeah, confirmation bias. You have to be a big person, right, to try to fight against that, because we all have these certain things that become beliefs, right?
Yeah.
You got to be careful. Belief is concluding in the absence of evidence, right? Faith has its role in life, but not in science, really. Yeah. And so, yeah, I try to do that. I mean, but yeah, I would need a pretty powerful data point, like you're saying, like here it is in black and white.
Right.
Look at the black swan. There it is. So if I found out something that, fish oils were way worse than I thought, or maybe protein was much more damaging to renal function or in healthy people or whatever, I would have to have a pretty serious, extraordinary claims. In my mind, those are pretty extraordinary after decades of stuff to the contrary, require extraordinary evidence. Yeah. But you also have to be able to say, oh, okay, embracing what's real is it's the burden of science. No matter how much you like it, science doesn't care what we want. But that's not how most people act, especially in this politically charged environment. People want to double down. They don't want to admit. It's almost like weakness. Like somehow they think it's weakness if they were wrong. It's like, no, you made the best conclusion you could at the time. Here's new data. You have a new conclusion. Just keep the standards high, I guess.
Yeah. My pet peeve on that is some people in the fitness world, especially on the nutrition side, instead of just saying that, hey, I kind of changed my mind on this. Here's the new data it's based on. Here's the process I went through. Here's why I changed my mind. They kind of go with the either double down and never change their mind on anything, or they'll change their mind and then they'll be like, well, this is what I meant all along. It's like, no, like 4 years ago, you said the direct opposite of that.
Right. And that's okay.
And that's fine.
Yeah. No, it's true. When everything is commercialized and everything is commoditized in this late stage capitalistic Western world we live in, if you've got a book that's still selling, and the whole premise was just overturned because of that picture of the black swan, there's a huge conflict of interest, right? People aren't going to say, the book's wrong, don't buy the book, right? Because they have too much invested in it, literally, time and money. And that's the problem with everything being, commoditized, I think, and everything commercialized instead of being able to follow the data. And, you're going to hone in. You're going to inch closer and closer to what's real. So you might as well do that. But it's hard. Yeah, it's hard when you've commercialized all of your opinions or conclusions into a product, But
yeah, we see that not just in products, in thought processes. As far as training.
Oh, yeah.
There are people that are so invested in one way of training, when the evidence points the other way, they're just so vested in it that it's like, nope, it's the one way. And it's like, come on, man, this evidence is staring you in the face.
Right. Yeah.
So, I don't know. The big one for me for products is, like, let's say if it's a scientific study and some new kind of something potentially used on a supplement or something. Like, generally for me, if it instantly has 100 influencers pushing it, that's a huge red flag for me. Like if you notice all of a sudden they have their marketing budget is way larger than their study budget, it's like, oh, okay, it's just a red flag to me. Because we've seen it so many times in the last 20 years. Like generally the thing that's being pushed the most by marketing ain't around long. You know, it's being pushed because of a huge profit margin on it.
And you usually can get it underneath any testing feedback kind of thing.
Yeah.
If it's like a supplement or something, you can push it really hard up front. And then by the time people start suing you for stuff, you've already made your money and you're out of there.
Yep. So that's the tough one.
New affiliate for Bucked Up, Phil?
I'm sure it's still around. So, yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I, we joke, we say, we got a thinker over here. And Phil just demonstrated that, right? Like when I see all this marketing, instead of nodding like a sheep, I think the opposite. Like, why do you have to try to market so much? Because you have to convince people of something that's marginal, right? Instead of something that stands on its own. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely huge marketing budgets for anything is a red flag. It's like, generally something good in strength and conditioning field, be it a supplement or you find out it's real fast because lots of very credible people are using it. And generally the really credible people are so busy, they're not like pushing it like an influencer would. If you're trying to convince me of something with like every bit of your, personal drive, that's a red flag. It's like, why are you trying to convince me so hard?
Right.
But is that just us though? Like people who are thinking about the things like a buying decision is usually like emotional, right? I mean, everything, if you go into marketing stuff and it's like, you're essentially trying to coax their emotions. You're not like trying to coax their thinking at all. You're actually trying to bypass their thinking process. Like boiling sales down into this is, a little, I don't know, pedantic, but you're literally, the whole sales process is trying to get essentially past their thinking into their emotions and then to scramble those emotions up to either feel good about the thing that you're giving them or initially like feel bad about where they're at and, without your product or supplement or whatever. And so in terms of fitness, at least, with that, I don't know that I'm more of a just logical person in general. So it's like and skeptical. So between us four, I'm pretty sure that'd be like kind of the consistent piece of it is like more logical and skeptical. So us four people would be out on the buying decision, but they would then net, 1,000 other people, right? Matter of fact, people wouldn't even listen to us if the marketing got to them first, even though we're experts in the field.
Yeah. Gerald, that's like that old phrase. People they'll forget what you said or did, but not how you made them feel. And marketers know that. And so, let's connect this to something that you've had loyalty to in the past, or you feel good about, whatever value proposition they're pushing at you. It's too bad, right? Because that's at odds with science, which is science doesn't care what you want. Science doesn't care how you feel about it. We're going to follow the data. But that's what leads you inchwise toward truth. And it's a good point that Phil has about rubber hits the road in the muscle and strength sports. Man, people are going to guinea pig right now. And you'll know within, I don't know, a year or two for sure that this is BS or not. To your point, though, Jerome, that people have made their money then. I mean, in fact, they'll go through the cycle. We talk about that all the time. They'll go through products that don't work. They'll still surge in sales for a year or two. Stuff like creatine will stick around, right? Stuff like a lot of this other crap will just die right off. I was just reading an article about frac. You remember ferulic acid? Not that it's not real. It's in brown rice, it's antioxidant, but a guy wrote an article in Flex magazine and all the bodybuilders went out like, this is the natural, this is the bomb. We're going to be huge, hypertrophy. And it just didn't work. And so it dropped off the radar. Now watch it pop back up at some point because we got a fresh group of people, of noobs. But
yep, it will. It'll pop back up. That's one thing about this industry.
Yeah. Yeah, there's only so many ideas, it feels like, and we're just going to, hey, it made money before. We'll use that same ploy. Yeah.
Yep.
And the new group
every 5 to 10 years, they have a whole new group of people.
Oh, yeah.
Right. They don't remember.
Yep. And they don't want to listen to us. They're like, oh, boomer.
Oh, I know. Which we're not. Even I'm not a boomer. Bastards.
You're just too old to understand. This is real science.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting piece because it does show that kind of, it's tongue in cheek, but that whole article is about the frustration of, well, first it causes cancer, then it doesn't. And then it's funny, they're talking about exploding organs and x-ray eyes. And but it does make the point that people are frustrated. They don't know what to believe. And I think the ultimate lesson here is that science moves in these tiny reductionist answers. They're not wrong individually, right? But people, you have different methods, whether it's the people or the dose or whatever it is, the duration of a study, how they measured it, what equipment. I mean, they leave all that stuff out of the evening news, which always drives me batty. Like new study, and they drive right at the conclusion. And they leave out the stuff that any thinking man or woman would think, like, well, how did you measure that? In what dose? Or like Mike said, is this in a dish? Is this in a rat? People don't think about some of the differences between rats and people. Biologically, they're quite different in a lot of ways. I mean, they can be similar as well. I get it, but still. And they leave all the methods out, and they leave all the thinking out.
Yeah, and if you're a general population who's not necessarily trained in science and you're getting your data from the media, it does look like that, because the media, like you said, just takes, this is going to kill you or this is going to be amazing. And so it does look like you're just getting thrown from one end of the spectrum back and forth all the time.
Yeah. I'm curious, you guys that have strength clients, at some point, do you think risk is low? I'm going to guinea pig this on myself or my people a little bit and see what happens. Do you ever make it into your own experiment?
I try it myself before I try it on a client. That's just how I've always been.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't think of anything in my facility or coaching people that I have them do that I haven't done first. And that's just, it just feels right to me. It's like, how can I ask this dude to do that if I've never done it? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And that's even as simple as a move. Like, okay, let's try this. And just see if there's any instantly negative side effects to it. Whatever. But
same. I'll try stuff all the time, but I put it into at least a 3-week cycle for myself, basically, and then so I get kind of the idea of how to coach it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I do kind of the same. One of the decisions I had to make probably about 15 years ago was, am I going to try stuff myself, even if that is at the detriment of my own training and results? Because if you're kind of the first monkey trying it, it may not always work real well. But I'm like, I would rather take on that consequence myself than pass that on to a client. So I'm like, okay, so I'm willing to try different things, obviously, investigating it, doing the best you can, even if that may not be the most beneficial to my goals, because I think that's more beneficial to my clients. So for me personally, I'm okay with a little bit of that trade-off, here and there, just to have more experience with it.
It's a good call. You got to be careful, I think.
Yeah.
In saying, I'm not you. Right, because that's one of the big fallacies you see on all these videos. Look at my abs. It's like, okay, you're on what kind of peptides, and you're genetically gifted, and you're 22 years old, and they'll say, work for me, so it'll work for you. Well, again, that's one of those tenets of science, But it is a good idea, though, to at least experiment a little bit on yourself and see within the context of the people you run with, like in your environment, are you seeing anything at all? Is there an effect size there that's worthy of pursuit?
Yeah. And on some stuff that I haven't used peptides or TRT or anything like that. So for that kind of stuff, I have legitimate world experts that I just refer them to. And I'm like, hey, I haven't done this, but here's the data. Here's this person who can help, guide you through it. I trust them. And if this is an option you want to try, this is going to be, your best bet to talk to them, and then they communicate back to me what we're doing. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. So for that kind of stuff, there's also a way you can still incorporate it.
Or even like, I'm sure Jarrell or Phil, if you're like, I tried this movement for a couple of weeks and I just really feel better, or I feel like my numbers are going up on this or that, primary lift, you'd also be quick to point out, but you know what? You're not built like I am. Maybe the client's short or different limb length or different whatever propensity or injuries. There's background things where you would say, I think this might have some promise, but that's just me. Let's see what this might do for you. It looks like the risk is low. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that also gets into, I've done a better job the last couple of years of asking new clients, like, what is your risk tolerance? Like, do you want me to go with like 80% is what I generally do of stuff that I think is going to work pretty well? 10%, not sure. The other 10% is really kind of on the hairy edge, and some
Harry.
people are like, I'll do 50%. Other people are like, no, I'm very conservative, and I've realized that a lot of it just kind of comes down to even their personality too, and what they're willing to risk assessment up front. But I've done, I think, a better job of having that discussion with new clients sooner now. Or in the past, I just felt like I was just kind of guessing, and I'm like, maybe I should just ask them.
Yeah, it's a good point. We do it with investing. Why not
Yeah.
with people's, fitness?
Yeah, no, and I think that's the next logical step. Basically, that's what I was going to say. Basically, if I test something on myself, now I've got this N of 1. Okay, there was a positive effect. Then instead of going the natural marketing route of today, where after doing an N of 1 study on myself, now I just tout it as the best thing since sliced bread, I will go to usually select clients that I've had for a long time that I know are open to things and be like, hey,
Yeah.
I tried this, it worked. Would you mind? Can we try it on you as well? I can't tell you it's going to work. It did for me. Do you mind being a test subject in this?
Yeah.
And, yeah, let's fucking do it. That's awesome. Some people are like, hell no, we're doing great. You know? But,
yeah, not become the Phil system after 3 weeks on yourself. Work for me. It's going to work for you.
Oh, yeah, we see it all
X-ray
the time.
vision.
I mean, I can't tell you how many, and I know Jarrell has seen some over the last 15 years, like gyms, like they will latch onto something for months, and then like the whole atmosphere of the gym changes. So 1 minute it's we're a West Side gym for 6 months, and then bullshit, that sucks. We're now this, and it's like their whole system changes at the drop of a fucking knife, and like the clients themselves have to be confused as hell. Like,
yeah, there's a guy here, a trainer here before I took over. That was kind of, I mean, he basically was 6-week training cycles, but not training cycles. It'd just be like, he trained people by the 6-week challenge. Pretty much mindset all the time. Like every 6 weeks was like a brand new, something. Either it was brand new training thing, brand new supplement. He was really into like black seed oil. And then at one point, like bull semen. It was kind of funny, but so every 6 weeks was like a brand new deal. So I've seen that. Yeah. Firsthand.
I'm not even going to comment. Wow.
I mean, low-key, dude. Oh man, he got ate up with the, what was his name? Or he got ate up with the guy who was on all the drugs and then,
Liver King?
Liver King. Yeah. So he got ate up with the Liver King stuff. And this dude never believed anything I said. Like, so he'd be like, oh, CrossFit gamers. I'm like, yeah, those are good for like the drugged up guys or whatever. And then he was like, believed no one was doing drugs. He was like, no, that guy said he believed he's a Christian. He's not doing drugs. I was like, dude, you're crazy. And so he like just didn't buy it. And then so when the Liver King, he had that video where he ate like raw bull testicles or whatever. After he saw that, there's like a supplement. They do a supplement that's like bull semen, and it's at like some of the like, I don't know, more fringe supplement places. And he was taking that. He was all about that for a while, man. And then passed it on to his clients. I was like, oh, wow. All right, man. Hey, you can sell, you can sell, baby.
You bring up it's a good point though, that you can't, when I say follow the science, I don't mean change on a dime every time a new study comes out, right? You got to look some consensus here, because you're right. I think about like martial arts gyms. As a kid, I grew up in that kind of environment, and one school is not going to say, nope, our soft style is completely wrong. A harder style is better. Let's do that for 6 weeks, not 6 years, 6 weeks, and change everything and throw all your tenets out the window. And yeah, that doesn't make sense either. Yeah, it's funny.
Well, that's honestly how you learn in this industry. I mean, how we all started was like whenever you got into weights, you tried something. Like the learning process where it's like, okay, I remember years ago, and the new training, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks. And then you do that, you catalog what happened, then you move to the next one. Like, there's no way of skipping that. You got to just try new things. And then eventually over time, what you do after you've tried 100 things, maybe you have one thing from each of those things that works, and you start to mix
Embrace.
and find out what works.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Totally. All right. Well, yeah, I appreciate the input on this kind of stuff. Like I said, I was both entertained and dismayed by that article. So I thought I'd just ask you guys how you deal with this kind of stuff. It is sort of walking a line, between changing your conclusion, having the guts to change your conclusion, and the moral fiber not to, stick with something because you're selling it, but also not being a fool about it. And the general public is so confused. Anyway, all right, let's go to break. After the break, Jarrell's going to lead us through an interesting topic that we were just talking about before we hit the record button. And we'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Iron Radio is back, and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network, as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio /Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. Second, please tell your friends who are longtime loyal listeners that they may see emails that share just the episode link and the show notes. This is a new thing, and we hope it will build community. Third, if you were a supporting member in the past, we may prompt you to resume through PayPal. But we will confirm each and every donor before reinstating that membership category. We'll never just restart your $4 auto payments without agreement from you. And of course, we will accept new members moving forward as well. Starting back slowly and honorably is the goal. And lastly, expect the sister show Nutrition Radio to expand into once weekly 45 to 60 minute episodes with guest co-hosts covering the same nerdy nutrition news that's been broadcast for a few months now in daily 10-minute clips. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the Iron Radio podcast. Second topic here today, and it's just something I've seen online in various either social media driven kind of push, is two things. Well, one specifically is kind of slander against the back squat for specific populations, but in some cases, even as an exercise that is worthwhile in general. And then the other is slander against just free weights over machines. I've seen both of those in varying degrees and quite a few places from, I don't know, I would say necessarily respected places, but it's more so like very popular, people, there's a popular sentiment growing with these primary concepts. So I thought that was an interesting topic I'd like to hear from you guys on.
I can start it out. This was bound to happen because no, honestly it is, because with the birth of CrossFit came the birth of like functional free weight training. It became oh, machines are shit. It's always one extreme. So with the advent of CrossFit, we saw like a giant push to everybody to now squatting, deadlifting, pressing, and things like that. And the machines are totally crazy. So we went one way. So we were bound to have a backlash the other way, when in reality, like we've said 100 times on the show, reality usually exists in the gray area somewhere. Like, machines aren't horrible. They have their place. Free weights aren't just God's message to men. They have their place. It's a mixture of both. And like, we live in this polarizing society where like one thing has to be good at any given time. And I think that's what you're seeing. I mean, you're seeing this obvious backlash against that, so you're going to see a push the other way.
Yeah, and my thoughts are, too, it depends on the context, which gets left out almost all the time on online discussions, too. I mean, in general, I don't use the back squat a whole lot. I don't think it's a bad exercise, but for most clients I have online, when I get a video of them, unless they're experienced doing it, it doesn't look the greatest. Their movement in the hips isn't really so good. A lot of them don't have good external rotation. So I do use more searcher squat, front squat, safety bar squats, unilateral stuff, etc. But again, it depends on, are you coaching them? Are they competing in powerlifting? Well, shocker, you'd have to back squat then. But are they looking for transfer to the field? If it's to sport performance, especially at an intermediate to advanced level, I kind of agree with the stuff from Cal Dietz that, yeah, you probably need to go to more of a split stance, or what he calls a sports back squat, where your heel isn't planted on the ground all the time, and probably look at different, movement patterns. I think for movement, that's going to transfer better. It's for what degree? And even for like hypertrophy, again, who are you talking about, right? Like, it's, if you've never back squatted before, adding a squat's probably going to be great. If you can back squat 400 pounds and you want to make your quads bigger, you probably find some other stuff that's better.
Yeah.
I actually would say, based on the grounds of how people describe their side of the argument, they would essentially flag Zerchers and like any of those other squats into the same category as back squats.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Shit. That seems more crazy.
Yeah, I think that would be their kind of position on it. I'm paraphrasing in terms of overall, but I think in terms of the free weight stuff and just the back squat, like their reasoning for, saying no to the back squat would actually, I think those, like the safety bar, I think would be out too, be included in that same range. But
I think a big part of this too is it ties into the first part of the show and the marketing. Like, the marketing on such things like this work, like they purposely go drastic for marketing purposes. That's just like when Mike Boyle did the whole death of the back squat thing, like front squats for everyone. Like, that shit was on purpose. He wanted to get a rise out of people.
Of course it was.
Like, and how do you get a message out like that? By being just obviously, you have to put out a message that is just obviously, God, what's the word? Extreme. If you put out an extreme message, even you're going to get hate too, but it's like anything else. Like what I learned in art school, like the only thing you don't want to be is just accepted. You want people, if you want a piece to be seen and marketed, you need to be loved or hated. Both of them are good because you'll get lots of hits. Yeah. And that's what it is. A lot of it's, So a lot of it's, well, we kind of like some machine work more, but they just go full on the fucking other. It's just like Pavel, meeting him. Like, he was the kettlebell fucking god. That's all he preached was kettlebell, 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 kettlebell. But when you met him and talked to him, he's like, I use a lot of free weights. He never talked about them. Because his message was, all we need is the kettlebell. And, but that was his stick, so of course that's what he talked about, even though he himself used a lot of free weight exercises. They do it, a lot of this, sadly, is for marketing purposes.
A lot of Pavel's messaging was right from John Duquesne. So John was the one who came up with the messaging.
And it makes sense once you look at it from a marketing perspective. Don't say you're fucking deadlifting. We want to sell this goddamn kettlebell.
Right. Stay on message. Stay on message. Yeah.
And that's the issue. And a lot of these, I think a lot of the thing we see now, especially with the rise of social media, is just that. Like, they're being extreme to be extreme. They're taking an extreme stance to get hits.
Yep. Contrarian, right? Like, if I speak contrary to the status quo, everybody has to find some niche. Again, it's a problem with this late stage capitalism thing. And I said it before, I'm not against capitalism. I'm just against commoditizing bloody everything. And so everybody wants to market. Everybody's a brand. They're not. Their key mission is not to be a coach and help their clients oftentimes. It's to be a brand and get clicks and hits. And so you get yellow journalism. They'll say something absurd and contrarian. They're looking for a niche that, no one's covered this. I'll do that. I'll build a system around that, no matter how stupid, right? Because then you can own it.
Even if they don't believe in it.
But you can market it. That's crazy. A lot of times it's made up entirely, and it's not even something that they did.
Yep. They just know it'll get clicks.
Right.
Yeah.
But
What's the deal with the machine superiority? I mean, I can see in certain situations if you're injured, and it just that machine fits your body. We've all been on a machine that just does not work with our anatomy kind of thing. But I mean, where do they go with machines over free weights? Like, what are some of the main arguments again?
So, I mean, I think there was and I looked at it briefly maybe 2 weeks ago, but there was a meta-analysis that was released within the last probably year, just kind of measuring, going over all the machine versus free weight stuff. And there's kind of a gentle conclusion that there's no significant difference between machines and free weights in terms of load on muscles, muscle building, I think joint load, and I think those are the major metrics. I can't remember the others that they discussed, but those are the major ones that stood out to me. But essentially, and I saw that used from a lot of people as like there's no significant difference at all between free weights and machines for virtually any goal.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll say this. This happens so much to me in like strength and conditioning is just because there's so much variance in how people train, the levels at which they train, et cetera, where it's like the coach would have the best answer more so than, the science on the subject personally. It's like, if you've done both as a coach, like you kind of played around with both, been in machines or whatever. And it's like, I personally have just seen like, I can get better results coaching people through a lot more free weight stuff and a lot less, machine type stuff. Certainly I can adapt, but like just learning to squat, right? Like a goblet squat, you'll have a lot more benefits than, focusing specifically on like a leg press or, whatever you would supplement for that. So just as a point of where the science is somewhat behind where the strength and conditioning coaches are in a lot of cases, but it's kind of like my take on it.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of operational definitions here, and again, inclusion criteria in the meta-analysis. Like if you were to tell me,
experienced or not,
tension on the quad, you can do leg extensions, and that's the same thing as squats. I'm calling bullshit. Yeah, you can feel that a lot. You can get a lot of tension on that muscle. Don't tell me that I'm going to build legs with leg extensions. Now, a different machine, you mentioned leg press. I kind of like leg presses. Now, don't get me wrong. If I take some time away from leg work and I come back and I squat, man, I love that. Phil is always on about, and accurately so, like I'm a tissue assassin. I want to be sore quads, hamstrings, adductors. I want soreness. I want some feedback that I just activated that stuff thoroughly. And I'll get that from a squat like nothing else. Is that weird about my build? I mean, I'm short, maybe. But yeah, to say one machine is a machine. A machine is a machine. That's like saying a cup of coffee is a cup of coffee. That's just not accurate. So we're back to that over concluding like we talked about in the first half of the show, like, oh, machines are this. Oh man, there's lots of different machines. Some are, in my opinion, vastly superior to others, even if it's just for hypertrophy.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is too, the level of people you get into studies. Like most studies are not getting advanced lifters or even intermediate lifters. So if it's a meta-analysis that includes people, recreational lifters or people who are relatively new to training. And like you were saying, Jarrell, we don't know how well they've been coached in free weights and what they're doing or what their form is. Yeah, you're trying to control for obviously that stuff when you're doing a study, but most of the studies are going to be relatively short. Yeah, I think you could make an argument for hypertrophy and that type of thing that machines might be better. But again, it's context, specific, and there's a lot of other variables too. So I think the over conclusion is an issue based on what was the inclusion within the study itself.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what you're saying.
That's the internet.
two people off the street and they've never seen a weight in their life,
Right.
I can deduce that, like, if I put one on a leg press and one on squat, like, the learning curve for a leg press is nil. You know? I need to teach this new person how to squat. So let's say it's 6 weeks long. It takes me 3 weeks to just teach them how to squat properly. That other person has 3 weeks of leg pressing hard already in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so of course that's going to work out. But then you have to look at the context of the study. And we took people that have never done anything before, and look, the leg press group did better. Yeah, because they were able to work hard from day one. You know, I had to actually teach this person how to do a move, and they had to be somewhat proficient in it before I could load them. So not a shocker, but
it's too bad this is floating all over the web, though. You know, like this expresses itself as this backlash, like you said, inevitable backlash. Like, it's easy to just be contrarian because history teaches us, I think anybody who's looked at it, history, science, the art of it all is that, free weights are good. Free weights are good. It's like what we talked about recently about the bilateral versus unilateral movements. There was this, like, we've got to, they're really getting trashed, these bilateral movements. I'm like, really? Because the people that I've known, now this is just experiential, that fool around with the one-legged movements like I see people doing in these chain gyms all over, they're not nearly as big as the people who pile weight on and back squat, baby. I'm sorry, there's not. Now, there's a lot of things that would go into the methods of a study, including the duration. And I like the idea, too, about, is this a 6-week study? Because these noobs don't even know how to engage. They can't even, pull it off.
If people take the time, like, it stares you right in the face. How many times have we talked about, like, over the last 15 years, how many people we've had on the show? The resounding theme, the biggest, the strongest fucking people we've had on the show, their training programs are the most simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a resounding theme. Like, most big, strong people have, like, what did you do? I pressed, I squatted, and I deadlift. I did that over and over for 25 years, and I'm jacked. Everybody wants to complicate everything. It needs to be magic. Like, your system needs to be this super complicated thing, and for marketing purposes. Whereas the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. So.
Yeah, we got pretty far back in the early bodybuilding, when I was beginning, of 3 sets of 10. 3 sets of 10 and use more weight, progressive overload, over time. And look, I'm bigger and stronger. Could I have had more nuance to that? Yeah, but I felt like the meat and potatoes were there. I mean, I put on like 20 pounds my first year lifting,
Exactly.
I just think of any gym I've ever been to that have, like, the strongest people that look like sides of beef with eyeballs. Like, it's usually not the cleanest gym. Like, you're kind of worried you may get some hepatitis B or something like that, but it's basic rusty weights. There's a few machines here and there. That's about it. You go to the opposite end where it's all machines. Like, you can barely find a dumbbell, and it's like the inverse of that usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be my first argument to a client. It's like, okay, you go walk into Planet Fitness and then go walk into West Side. Tell me which gym.
Right.
I mean,
something about the environment, right? The machines.
Generally, if you go to a place that is nothing but machines, there are no monsters in there.
No.
That's something. Like, if machines were that much more effective, at this point, that's all any superior athlete would do.
Oh, yeah.
They're not, they are going to gravitate towards that. Your excellence is going to gravitate towards what works. So
even at Planet Fatness, I'm telling you, the people, they're all gravitating toward the handful of Smith machines there. They're getting as close to free weights as they can. There's an ocean of cardio equipment, an ocean. And the most muscular people are all, you have to wait to get a utility bench and a pair of dumbbells,
Yeah.
And that's where experience comes in. You're right. You could end up with somebody who's purely a science nerd, young enough that hasn't read enough papers or seen a real-world application. They're like, listen, for tension on these muscle fibers, this does the same thing, or hypertrophy over a 6-week study or whatever it is. Okay, but to me, it's like Mike and I have had this discussion. As physiologists, in a way, we're kind of like physicians for healthy people, which there's no money in. But so we'll run down this list of possible systems that are being affected. But, I would always talk to a physician. I've had great conversations with physicians, and I'm like, but I don't have diagnostic experience, right? So what do you know this to be from your 40 years in the field? And then she or he would be like, well, Lonnie, it's masquerading as this. It's this 9 times out of 10. Trust me. What you're saying is logical, but it's not really the way things pan out. So that experience, whether it's diagnostic experience or coaching experience, that stuff matters, right? It matters.
That's also why I've had several marketing people tell me I should just stop coaching people online entirely because it's taking up too much time. And it is not like a huge component of my income. It is a good part of my income. But I also then feel like, well, all the new stuff that I tried on myself, like we were saying earlier, like I want to try it on someone else. Like, could I get someone just to do machine only type stuff or whatever? Like, I want the data, and obviously I'm doing them a service and helping them, and I want to see them reach their goals. But I just feel like if I never had access to that, I just feel like I would stagnate. And I also think that newer clients coming in have new problems that I've never had to solve before. Because they're paying me a lot of money, I'm very vested in figuring their shit out. Where I might not have gone down that path otherwise because there was no need at that point.
Yep. No, which makes sense. So
good stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Disturbing topic, but a good one to wrestle with. Yeah. More internet bullshit.
Hey, man, we'll always have a place here as long as the internet's alive. We'll have something.
That's right.
So,
all right, guys. Yeah. Well.
Okay, everybody have a good weekend.
Yep, we'll see you.
See you.
Feel it.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community.
The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.